A while ago, I posted a video talking about the weird notion that John Williams stole the theme to Jaws from Dvorak's Ninth Symphony. Recently, I listened to a bunch of horror film soundtracks that even James A. Nice would be impressed, and I noticed something else. I found out that the theme to Jaws is not entirely original, and it has nothing to do with Dvorak. To understand what I'm going for here, first we need to look at Bach's Toccata and Fugue in D minor. It was used for villains in early horror films like Jekyll and Hyde and the Black Cat. I guess Dracula and the Mummy just wanted to be different and use Swan Lake instead? Thanks to these early films, both the organ and the toccata and fugue became the symbolism of horror, villains, or at least great power.
Whatever your name is, what are my things doing here? I'm talking to you. My clothes and things are up in the room. Naturally, I brought them.
For our research today, the organ isn't as important, but put a pin in the toccata and fugue, as we'll come back to that later. The second important element that we need to look at is the dies irae motif, used all over film soundtracks to symbolize death. Death being an important element in horror films, I mean that's exactly what Dead Meat's all about. The dies irae can be used in a variety of ways, from an ostinato or continually repeated musical phrase or rhythm, during scenes where characters are thought to be dead, like here in Jurassic Park.
The other car!
Dr. Grant?
Or as the theme to a tune about making Christmas more Halloween-like, or deadly.
Making Christmas is so fine.
Or the theme to the main characters of a movie, foreshadowing that in the end, they're gonna die.
Jacket security, cell block 4227.
How about directly on the nose, after the line,
Kill him.
The Shining is known for its opening with the dies irae, but did you know it's not the only film to do so? The Screaming Skull opens with it as well. And so does Killer Nun, with the vocal chant version. Naturally, horror films are going to use this motif a lot, like in these scenes from the Friday the 13th films. And I realized the first few examples weren't exactly horror films, so here's a few more. Oh yeah, and video games, they're not immune to this either. The third element is chromaticism, or playing a series of notes that are the shortest distance from one another, pitch-wise. That appears a ton in horror films.
God, she didn't fall in.
You mean there's still acid in there?
I better take a look.
And sure, I'll include some video games as well. But where did this idea originate? It came from the first major film soundtrack, King Kong. This chromaticism certainly makes things very uneasy for the listener, and it's no wonder it was used by other composers in later films.
Horror is a very incestuous genre.
Even if there's only a few chromatic notes in the themes, it's definitely more dominant than any other interval, aiding in that tension in horror. So what do these three elements have in common? Two notes. And it's like horror films have this rule that the first two notes have to be a half step apart, and there's no shortage of examples.
It was 10 years ago, on a night just like tonight.
Wait, that's the DSCH motif. Naturally, here's some video game examples.
1998. I'll never forget it.
Since two notes don't get you very far, there are plenty of examples where there's two notes repeated back and forth.
Magnify.
Okay, that was from the comedy horror based on Scream. Wanna bet there's a repeated half step in all 5 films?
Rule number 2, the killer's motive is always connected to something in the past.
For the last 2 examples, I'll just look at the first film in the Halloween and Friday the 13th movies. I've already shown a ton of examples so far, so here's just one video game soundtrack. This brings us back to Jaws. This theme, while primarily just that repeated half step, which fits exactly into everything we've gone through in this video so far, has one more element we need to look at, and that is this section. There's one more horror film that I saved for last that we need to look at because after a few stabs...
Have you ever seen Stab? No, not those stabs. Musical stabs. Yeah, like that. We get a repeated half step and it breaks from that tension and gives us this soaring melody. And that movie? Breaking it down to those elements, the theme to Jaws is not too far from Psycho, and considering Psycho was major for the horror film genre, as well as the composer Bernard Herrmann being a friend of John Williams who scored Jaws, it's no surprise that the theme to Jaws, revolutionary in its own way, took some musical thoughts from Psycho. While I included a ton of examples in this video, I honestly barely scratched the surface of the breakdown of the half-step interval in these movies. Take the Scream series for example. While the first 3 favored the repeated half-step, Scream 4 actually favored more of the chromaticism element. Also, in my last video, I teased the soundtrack and asked you if you knew where this was from. If you thought Jaws, you were wrong. It's actually from this scene in The Predator. So what are your thoughts on horror films? Do you know any that feature the half step that I didn't include here? Let me know your thoughts down below, and I will of course see you next time.